Hello, welcome to Into the Fire, a Burning Coal Theater Company podcast series.
Hi, this is Jerome Davis. I'm the artistic director of Burning Coal Theater Company, and I'd like to welcome everyone to Into the Fire, the Burning Coal Theater Company podcast series on all things theatrical. Today we have a very, very special guest, actor, director, man of the theater, Lonny Price joins us. Lonny, thank you for coming today. We most appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
So a lot of people know you as a director, but you started your career as an actor and have done work, in regional theaters, on Broadway, off Broadway, and in record, film as well, I guess. And so I would like to ask you, first of all, how did you start into this business? Did you have a mentor or a parent who was in the field, or as I said to somebody recently, did you hit your head? What happened?
I was dropped as a baby for sure. No, I didn't know my parents loved the theater, but they weren't of the theater or in the theater. They just loved it and took my sister and I to, Broadway musicals since I was 4. It was part of our birthday present, my sister Jody and I. And so we saw a lot of shows. We, lived in the tri-state area here.
Yeah.
And then we had the albums at home. So it was, something that my parents loved, and they sort of introduced my sister and I to it by taking us to the theater.
Do you remember the first one you saw, or the first one that stuck?
Well, first one I saw was Oliver, which I saw the original production of Oliver, I think on the occasion of my 4th birthday. And as I say a lot, if you don't want your kid to be in the theater, don't take him to Oliver. I mean, all the kids are up there singing and dancing, and it looks like a lot more fun than sitting watching. So I was enamored of it, very quickly. And, I don't remember ever thinking I would do anything else.
I know that feeling very well.
Mhm.
You ended up auditioning for Stephen Sondheim and Hal Prince, and the new musical that they were writing to follow up from Sweeney Todd, I believe, was the previous
Yes.
one, which is a tough act to follow, to say the least.
Yeah.
And do you remember how did that happen? Did you have an agent, or was there an open call, or how did you end up doing that?
Well, I had had a writing correspondence with Stephen Sondheim since I was 14, and I worked in Hal Prince's office as an office boy when I was going to high school, the Fame High School of Performing Arts, and so I knew them both. And Sondheim had come to see. I'd written to him about a play I was in called Class Enemy. Oh no, I'm sorry. Yeah, which he came to see, but also Bill Finn's falsettos.
Yeah.
I was in an early reading of it called Four Jews in a Room Bitching, and I invited him to it, and I don't think he thought I could sing. And he called the casting director and said, I think this is something Lonny should audition for. And through many permutations, a lot of which is in the film I did, Best Worst Thing, I wound up getting the part and did a bunch of readings for them. But I did have an agent, but it had nothing to do with. It was really a luckily personal connection to
Almost a
both
person, yeah.
men.
Yeah, well, that can be the way in our business. And the early days of that piece were, if best worst thing is to be believed, were really wonderful. It sounds like the group really bonded immediately and had some great experiences. That was not reflected in how the play was received when it opened.
Right.
I know you've talked a lot about that on in the Best Worst Thing that ever happened, which is an extraordinary documentary film, by the way, for anybody listening to this who is not familiar with that. It's very, very moving, and also, for my money, clarifies a lot of things about our business that most people never really take into account. They assume that we all have the trajectory of Tom Cruise or something like that, and most of us have much different careers. When did Yale happen for you? You were at Yale Repertory after that or before?
No, I never was at Yale. I rehearsed Master Harold there, the Fugard play, because they had done the production there. But no, I was not lucky enough to go to Yale. I went to Juilliard for a year and dropped out, and then I did a few shows before Merrily, and then Master Harold rehearsed up at Yale because that's where Athol had sort of felt very at home, and the show had premiered at the Yale Repertory Theater. So yeah, but that's my only association. I've taught there some master classes, and I taught for a semester, but no, I didn't go there. No.
So when you were in it, it was the Broadway
Yeah.
iteration. Is it correct? I see. Okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense. But you had the opportunity to work with Athol Fugard, who passed away in the last 10 days or so, I
Mm.
think. Can you? It's a little bit of a sidetrack to the conversation, but he was so meaningful to me in my life, and his writing, continues to seem ageless, timeless, and ever meaningful. And so I wonder if you could tell us just a bit about what the experience was for a young man working with someone of his stature.
Well, he was enormously kind, and I had 9 days to get up in the role. The gentleman that was playing it at Yale, who is sensational actor, Željko Ivanek, got a movie, and I think he thought they would wait for him to move it, and they didn't. And I was apparently the second choice, and I went back in and got the part. Um, Athol was lovely, kind, and it was an odd situation because I was playing him as a young man.
Mhm.
So, I modeled certainly the accent as best as I could on his accent. And yeah, he was just enormously supportive. I remember I once said, "Thank you for believing in me," and he said, "Believing in you is as easy as taking a breath."
Wow.
He was just so generous and loving, and yeah, he was just a beautiful, beautiful man. And
Did you
I was very lucky to be in his orbit for a little while.
did you know of his work prior to that?
No, I did not. I did not. I mean, A Lesson from Aloes, I think, had opened the year before.
Yes.
But no, I was not familiar with it. But then I became very familiar with it. Hello and Goodbye and all of his plays, and
Mm.
and I also wound up directing Valley Song. He had directed it at the Manhattan Theater Club, and then it moved to a bigger space, and he asked me would I direct it for him,
Mm.
and so that was quite an honor. And I loved that play and loved being around it. And yeah, I mean, Athol's was a poet and just a great playwright. And when he had something to say, he was really the voice of apartheid in the theater. And I think he did a lot of good. And I think people learned a lot, at least the people who go to the theater, about apartheid through Athol's plays. And because they were so human and not polemic at all. Uh,
Indeed, he managed to write about real people and make the micro become macro.
Yes,
That
very well put. Yes, Jerry, he did. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
he was something. Yeah.
yeah. Well, what a great piece of fortune to have had the chance to work with him and know him.
Yeah.
Stuff. And back to our topic, Mr. Sondheim would certainly fall into that category as well. Um, so after Merrily opened and received some unfavorable reviews, the cast was very young. Again, speaking for those who don't know the story, the three people who might not know the story that are listening to this podcast. The cast, the idea that Hal Prince had was to cast youngsters, even though the play covers a significant time frame. And can you talk about that a little bit? About how you as an actor felt about that, and how you approached playing the older version of your character of Charley?
Well, I mean, Hal's idea was if it was about a whole community. It's about a lot of, it's really about theater people who have a 25-year history and three friends who go through 25 years backwards, as everybody knows by now.
Right.
And his idea was if they were kind of disillusioned, bitter people in their 40s, but had started out as highly moral and stars in their eyes and just really good young people. And he felt that by the time you got to the end of the show, you would, if there were young people telling the story, you would think they weren't telling their story. They would have hope because actually you'd find out they were 18 or 20 and that their lives were in front of them and they wouldn't make the mistakes of the characters in the play, which is a great meta idea and very difficult to translate because you're spending a lot of time with, 20-year-olds playing 40.
Right.
Um, and he didn't really want anything. Hal was very charmed by a high school play that he had seen that his daughter Daisy was in.
Hmm.
And it was Oliver, and the curtain came down, and then the curtain came up before the kids were ready, and they were jumping up and down and just excited to be in the theater. And he was in his 50s, and I think he found that utterly charming. And then he put a bunch of, mostly unpolished performers on a Broadway stage, costing $35 a ticket at the time, very,
Wow.
very expensive.
Those
Um,
are the nosebleed seats now.
exactly. I don't even think that you can get a ticket for $35.
Right.
Um, but and then the audience was angry because they didn't want to see what, essentially not was a high school show, but was performed by kids who
Yeah.
were not, polished performers, and they reject. And so he worked very hard in the
Hmm.
long preview period of, trying to make it all a little slicker and to cut back on the things that were less, I keep using the word polished, but I think that's really what it was.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Do you think he ever, Prince or Sondheim and Firth ever thought about telling the story a different way?
Well, I mean, if you tell the story forward, it's just a really depressing story about some idealistic people who sell out.
Yeah.
I mean, I think and do terrible things. And people always say, "Oh, they should do it forwards." I said, "No, with a terrible idea
Yeah.
because it's just a downward slide, slide into hell."
Yeah.
No, I don't think doing it forwards would have helped anything or made people like it better. In those days, as you know, I've become a huge success now. Luckily, and it deserves it for sure.
Yeah.
But it was a long road for it to find its way. Um, yeah.
Right. Were you able to see the most recent
Oh,
iteration?
sure. Yes, yes, yes.
And did you feel what did they do that worked to help the audience I mean, part of it is the casting. I guess they cast sort of middle-aged people, but was there something else in the way the play was presented or in the edits that they made with the script?
Well, the script had been worked on for the last 40 years, so
Uh,
I mean, every version of it was different. And I guess this was a version that Steve had finally settled on. George died a bunch of years ago, so this is the version, which is very different from the one we did. And so I'd seen once in a while iterations of it. I don't really enjoy watching it.
mm,
Um, just because it has too much sense memory for me and it's just so complicated. It's just kind of but yeah, no, I think it was really in large part the electricity and the triumvirate of Lindsay and Daniel and Jonathan and their chemistry together, which was really, really palpable. And they also approached it as adults, so they had more sophistication probably. But I think their love for each other, honestly, was the key. And Lindsay being a very uncelebrated, not uncelebrated, but everyone talks about Jonathan and Daniel, but Mary's a really hard role. And that
Yeah.
first scene, for people who know it, where she's drunk and being mean to everybody, not mean, cynical, and um, she managed to find humanity in that woman. And I think the show always had a lot of trouble of getting past that first scene. And in her hands, I think she managed to make it not only palpable but moving. And so again, I think I honestly think those three performances were vital to its success because the material is really hasn't changed that much in the last 15 years. And there's been so many, encores and so many revivals of it in the city. But I think I would say it was the three of them.
Did you, this is maybe not altogether logical question, but I just wonder if there was anything that you missed when you watched this great, highly celebrated production. Was there something in you that wanted some of the innocence of that early production?
Well, the original show is framed by a high school graduation and a really amazing song called "The Hills of Tomorrow," which
Mm.
Frank and Charley wrote, and it's all filled with optimism and idealism, and um, uh, it's just a gorgeous lyric. I'm trying to remember, fling wide the gates to a world that waits as our journey starts. Behold, our hearts are high. It's just it's beautiful. And so I think that the kind of corruption of those innocent kids is very moving to me. That frame is gone. And
Yeah.
so I miss that. I miss that song. I miss the song Rich and Happy. I miss yet I love the song Growing Up, which he added, which I think is absolutely gorgeous and
Yeah.
one of Steve's best. So yeah, I think I miss a bunch of things. But ours was its own thing, and this is another version of it. And clearly this one's more successful. So who am I to say if one's better or not?
Well, you had a good vantage point on that first production, and that kind of leads me to the question of the best worst thing that ever could have happened. What led you to make that documentary? Was it the fact that they found that film that people thought had been destroyed, or was it something other than that led you in that direction?
Well, we did a concert version of it 20 years later, and I was singing "Old Friends" to Jim Walton, who actually was my old friend,
Mhm.
and it seemed like the score was not only um, elucidating or reflecting on, my words are not great today, the characters, but actually the people in it. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to use this music to put on the people that were in it, to assign them to the people that were in it or to that experience, aside from their characters. So that really was the impetus. And then I started doing the documentary, and I didn't have that footage. We were looking for the footage, and the documentary, I'd been working on it for 5 years,
Mhm.
and we kept looking for the footage. I mean, that was, my kind of the Holy Grail, finding that footage, which was for your audience. ABC had started a documentary on the making of the show, and they had to abandon it before we went into rehearsal. But there was all this footage of interviews with us as kids, and a long interview with me in my parents' bed, in my bedroom, in my parents' apartment, filled with enthusiasm and optimism and all of that the show's about. And anyway, so I knew that footage and I just knew it existed and we couldn't find it anywhere. And finally, uh, this man who looks for footage, his name is Miller Monzone, John and Miller Monzon said, I think you have a 9% chance of finding it, not even a 10%, a 9%. But he found it. And it was at ABC and it was mislabeled. We had looked up Merrily, Steve, Hal, Alvin Theater, nothing. And
Mm,
finally, he typed in B-Way, B apostrophe W-A-Y, and 37 boxes of film flashed on the screen. And they were in a mountain, which is how they keep celluloid so it doesn't disintegrate,
mm,
underground, for 30 whatever years, unopened, untouched since the moment they put it there.
mm.
So it was a really extraordinary thing to find it. And then the film got a lot better because we had it, because we did it without that footage.
Remarkable, absolutely remarkable. Um, I guess, and you've had an extraordinary career as a director uh, post your acting career, I guess, or subsequent to, and did that you had quite a success as an actor. You had Falsetto Land. You were in the first production of Burn This, if I remember right. Uh, and a lot of other things. Master Harold and the Boys comes to mind, but the transition to directing, is that something that you fell into? Is it something you were preparing yourself for all along, or is how did that come about?
It really did fall into it, Jerry. There's a very small 100-seat, 200-seat theater at the time called the American Jewish Theater.
Yeah.
And I was doing a play there as an actor. And the artistic director said, can you give me some suggestions for a director for a musical we're doing? And I gave him some. And then he said, what about you? And I honestly had never thought about it. I
Mhm.
didn't really know what a director did. I was always just looking at my part and trying to be good
Yeah.
in the role. So, and then very quickly I found that I just really liked it. I liked having more control. I liked being in charge. I liked worrying about everybody else instead of myself.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
it was a real wake up for me of how I wanted to spend my time and not be at the mercy also of a lot of people's incompetence. I had a lot of big opportunities post Merrily that were not uh, that were, produced by people who I don't think knew what they were doing and directed by people who I thought weren't so great. And I wanted to make the mistakes. I didn't want to be at the mercy of other people's mistakes. And so that, it just became increasingly painful to be an actor because you had no control over anything. So anyway, that's kind of how I fell into it. And I directed a show called The Rothschilds, which was written by the people who wrote Fiddler on the Roof, Bach and Harnick, and it ran off Broadway and moved and ran over a year. And I
Mm.
had a hit. And when you have a hit, people will trust you and give you scripts. And so I was just very lucky that I happened to, fall into it in such an easy way.
And you've done musical and non-musical alike. And did Best Worst Thing lead you to other film projects, or have
I
you thought about other film projects?
Best Worst took 9 years of my life. It was really hard, really long. It was bad for a long time. We just had 5 editors on it. It was really hard. And that was something that I was a passion project for me. So no, I will never do another documentary, but I did do one on Hal Prince called The Director's Life, which was on PBS, and that was Hal asked me to do it, and felt I owed it to him, and I also knew that maybe too ego-y, I thought, oh, I will do this well because I love him and I love his work, and I'll protect it. And so I did that, and that took a couple of years. And but that's it. I'm done with documentaries. Yeah, they're really hard, a lot of work, and you have to have a trust fund, and I don't seem to have, or I can't find it. So
Yeah.
maybe it exists, but I don't know where it is.
like the lost footage, maybe it'll show up,
Yeah,
turn up
it'll show
someday.
up. I hope so.
I'm curious, just sort of a silly aside, but how do you feel about the Richard Linklater?
Oh, I think
You
it's
know,
great. I mean, I don't know if I'll be alive when they're finished yet. So I think it's terrific. Yeah, I mean, how fascinating.
yeah,
Yeah, why not? Sure.
yeah. It's interesting to think of him doing a musical like that. But well, this has been terrific. I really appreciate your time on all this. We barely touched the tip of the iceberg in terms of your extraordinary career, both as an actor and a director. But you've certainly had a lot of influence on a lot of people and helped fashion the industry. One of our board members, Elaine Quagliata, will be listening to this podcast, and will because she was when I told her I was interviewing you, she almost fell out of her chair,
Oh
and
no,
jealousy.
Elaine, hello. Don't
Yeah,
fall
yeah.
out of your chair. I'm so flattered. Thank you very much, but please stay upright, please.
So my last question will be just that. Staying upright, the industry sort of took a bit of a hit with COVID, and I think was having some problems anyway with the ticket pricing and things like that. And you've had a 45 years or so to watch from the inside out and from the outside in. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on what needs to be done to keep the theaters alive and the art form alive.
Oh, it's a huge question, Jerry. I mean, it seems like it's sort of a little bit in two categories. I mean, the Broadway theater is just all way too expensive, and people, and you can't blame producers for not taking risks when it's, $15 million to do a small musical, and getting that money back is really hard. So they go for things like jukebox musicals, where at least an audience will know they'll get to hear their favorite songs,
Yep.
and they're paying $300 a ticket. So they want to know that what they're getting is something, they're not taking a risk. They know they'll like the Neil Diamond songs.
Mm,
Um, so it's really scary. One or two innovative, interesting things a year kind of get through,
yeah.
having been done regionally and get enough attention. But no, it's not healthy. So that's horrible. In terms of regionally, yeah, I don't know how your theater is doing, but I know people. What I'm hearing is that 30% of the audience didn't come back. I hope that's not your experience, but you looking like it is. Um, and that's terrifying. I mean, I don't know what the solution to that is. But I film a lot of what I do, and I know that there's a lot of streaming of shows, and for people who can't get out and um, or afraid to go out, and it's a really hard time with COVID, post-COVID, and all that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really have any solutions or ideas, except that I think the New York Theater hopefully will have a I think it probably has to collapse before it can come back in a new form. But I don't see that happening because they make so much money on the hits that nobody will stop them, even to say, shut it down. Let's do this. Let's figure this out. I don't know
Yeah.
if you know that, but in New York, in most musicals, it's $1 million to put your set in and $1 million to take it out. And that's just labor. So you're talking about the first $2 million of a budget is to just put in your set in the theater and take it out. That's just too much money.
Yeah.
Just too much
This
money.
means that the point of view being expressed in the art is likely to be of limited and therefore of limited appeal to mass population. Yeah, I don't, I think that's, and of course, real estate prices have a lot to do with that too. I know it's becoming harder and harder to live there. Um, but there are people who persevere,
Yes.
to use the coin a phrase,
Yeah.
and I'm talking to one right now. I'm talking to Lonny Price, who is director, actor, original cast member from Stephen Sondheim and George Firth's Merrily We Roll Along. Lonny, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure, and I'm so glad I was looking at the work you do, and it's really beautiful and important. And I know you do a lot of Steve stuff. And anyway, I wish you well, and I hope your theater continues to grow and flourish.
Knock on wood, and thank you, sir. And we look forward to your next endeavor.
Thank you so much, Jerry.
Take care.
You too. Good to talk to you. Bye.